Wait, what is that? Right, that music there. I don't need that intro music. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, but we doing our intro. Yeah. How come everybody else getting fan but me? Is there a way to cut off that theme song? There you go.
Hi, I just wanted to let you know you're on mute. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me on my app. You're currently on mute, Desmond. I don't know.
We just made history. Yeah, we just made history. Passed Amendment 4. Now you see we are the voices. FRRC, we the leaders of the new school.
Yes.
Let my people vote. You know that we are the voices. FRRC, we the leaders of the new school. Let my people vote. You know that we are the voices.
All right, we ready to go?
We
Camera
on,
rolling?
man. We on. Let's
That's
do
what I'm
this
talking
thing.
about.
Yeah.
Right, let's hit that theme song one more time. All right, let's do that, man. I love the theme song. This is our new FRRC theme song by Wavy Mob. You know, really helped bring a little energy to our podcast.
Just center the conversation,
Yeah.
man. That's what it does.
It does.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Man, we both got red shirts.
Yeah,
on.
right.
Look at you see it over there. That's kind of a different way to look at that. Yeah.
Started with nothing, we turned into something.
FRRC.
We are the voices, they gave
Yes,
us no choices.
this
You know
is
why
it.
we coming. We paid the way for tens and thousands, helping our citizens. They hit us with fines and fees, but they cannot stop the vision.
They hit us with fines and fees, but they can't stop the vision.
Just follow the clemency. Committed to ending discrimination
For all of the nation,
And we just made history. Yeah,
we make a history. We passed Amendment 4.
Now you see we are the voices.
FRRC.
We the
God.
leaders of the new school.
Let my people vote.
You know that we are the voices.
All right. What's up, everybody? This is Desmond and my partner.
Right.
What's happening, everybody? This is Neil with the Our Voice podcast. We're excited to see y'all tonight.
Okay, great. So I think
How you feeling, Des?
Well, listen, I'm feeling great, bro. I am feeling great. Very excited. Want to just welcome folks to the podcast that serves to be the voices of people directly impacted by the criminal justice system.
Oh, what do you mean by directly impacted?
Man, that means that listen, if you're a returning citizen, formerly incarcerated, justice impacted person, someone you've been locked up, you've been arrested, you've been convicted,
you've been in the system.
You've been in the system in some kind of way, right? You're directly impacted. And for so long, there have been so many people that have served as our voices, right? Because our voices weren't pretty much heard.
Right. Other people were talking for us.
Other people were talking for us. And we were like, wait a minute. We are the subject matter experts, right? I always tell folks that when I got my law degree, it wasn't my first doctorate degree. I had one before that, and that was a doctor of the streets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
you got a double doctorate, is what
double
you're saying.
doctorate, right? and at the end of the day, man, it's people who've been directly impacted, man, that have something to say and something of value, right? And wanted to make sure that we elevated the voices of people impacted by the criminal justice system, and hence our voice.
Yeah, and let me add something, because we're going to be talking about democracy today, right? One of the things that I really think that a lot of people don't get is if you look at the expansion of democracy all across this country, you go to California, you go to Louisiana, you come here to Florida, and you look at what has happened over the last, many years, that expansion of democracy has been driven by people who are directly impacted. People who are like, you know what? Our voice matters, man. We got our dignity in this process matters, and we're not going to play all the political games. We're just going to try and get stuff done. And man, that's what we're talking about tonight.
I mean,
this idea of having your voice heard.
You talk about the origin of ban the box, right? Removing that question from applications to give people an opportunity to have a job, right? Well, that term ban the box, man, was coined, right, from our folks out of California, and with all of us are none, right? Directly impacted people. And it's so important. You're right. In Louisiana, in North Carolina, in California, in Florida, the greatest expansion of voting rights have been led by people who have been closest to the pain. And so it's right on with this. But listen, Neil, we could talk about this forever and a day.
It's true.
Right. But at the end of the day, man, listen, I am excited, right?
You're excited for tonight?
Man, yeah. What? Man, listen, let me tell you. And it's perfect symmetry because, this is Women's History Month, right?
That's right.
And we have with us the most amazing woman, outside of my wife, Sheena, that is, right? The most amazing, dynamic, impactful woman that I know in the state of Florida, right? That's here with us today. Right. She's also my adopted sister and my headache.
You going there already?
I'm going there already. Right?
Oh, man.
But no, she is so amazing. And we have with us today Pastor Rhonda Thomas. Right.
And I got to just tell you, Des, just in my walk here alongside you, man, those two words, when you hear them said anywhere, in the streets, in the pews, in the offices, Pastor Rhonda said, right. You're like,
everybody
exactly.
stops.
Oh, no. Pastor Rhonda said what?
And knees shall tremble, right? Because Pastor Rhonda is no joke. She is the executive director, right, of Faith in Florida, right? She is also co-pastor of New Generation Missionary Baptist Church.
Founding.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, founding. Along with her amazing dynamic husband, the Reverend Dr. Thomas, right? Ranzier Thomas.
I like how you got it official when you said that.
You got to get Reverend Doctor, right? But Pastor Rhonda has been doing, she started out as an organizer back in the days and has elevated herself to now she's leading the most impactful faith-based grassroots organization, right? I would say in the history of Florida, right?
The numbers would back you up.
And because of her leadership. And so she's just, and of course there's more, and we're going to get into that. But listen, I want everybody to welcome to the Our Voice podcast, the impeccable, the Queen of Queens, right? The warrior of warriors, right? The spiritual fighter that God has allowed to grace the soil of Florida, right? Pastor Rhonda Thomas.
Welcome, Pastor Rhonda.
What's up?
God bless the both of you. I am so honored to be here among these two amazing men. Desmond Meade, who's known all over the country, coming out of the 305.
That's right.
Not being known. Now he's known all over the country. That's nothing but an act of God. And then,
that's right.
And then he got his homeboy with him, the Neil, who is the voice for many across the state, who has left a major impact and legacy of what it's like to work together as one when it comes to returning citizens, being treated right, getting that voice, making sure their voice is heard, and we just continue to do this work together.
It is so much fun to do work with you. And if you're going to say nice things to us, then I don't know how to come at you with some good questions and stuff like that. Well, thank you for that. It was very nice of you.
It's not about us tonight. It's about you, Pastor Rhonda.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And then later on tonight, we're going to have, who we bringing on?
MLK the Third. word.
What?
Come on.
Man, what we bringing nothing but fire, man. Listen, Pastor Ron, you know, at the beginning of the year, we did a recap, right, and talked about all of the amazing guests that we had. And our production team of Brandon and Xavier was given the challenge, right, that our guest in 2022, right, had to go beyond what I guess was in 2021.
And we had good guests in 2021.
Yep. We had some real great ones, but they was challenged to up their game. And let me tell you something, they've been hitting ever since. And then when they thought they was faltering for a second, they went ahead and called the audible on us and brought Sheena on the co-host.
That's what I'm talking
right?
about.
And so, listen, we have been having amazing guests on here, man. And now with you, and of course, Martin Luther King III coming on. So later on, this is going to be a really amazing show. We want to definitely have some discussions about democracy, but you know, I think a good leadway into bringing on MLK is really just talking about, you know, your work in Florida, man. You know, one of the things that, you know, I always brag about is how we worked with you with Souls to the Polls for Amendment 4. And we engaged over 800 congregations of faith and brought together the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the African-American clergy community. We brought in the Latino evangelicals and even some conservative Christians. And we brought all these different denominations, whether it was AME, United Methodist, Baptist, Church of God. We brought all these different ecumenical denominations together under one umbrella, and everybody said in unison, "Let my people vote." Right, and you were at the helm of that. Could you just I really want you to tell our listeners about how you started. How did you get in this? Right, you know, because I know you came out of the great Miami Northwestern High School. That's only second to Miami Edison, of course, senior high, right? But I know you came up out of there, but were you organizing then? What got you into this work?
To be honest, I really didn't know too much about organizing. I know I cared about people, not just coming from the faith aspect, but when I reflect back, I could remember April 4th, 1968. We were getting ready to go to a birthday party. I was in the third grade. And my mom said the party had been canceled because Dr. King had been murdered. And I couldn't understand, why would they cancel the birthday party? Because I was a kid. And watching television, and during that time, you know, Black people only had a black and white television. And I was watching what all was going on, and I couldn't understand. And I remember saying, why are they treating Black folks like this? And I didn't think it was fair. And so I grew up saying what wasn't fair and what I thought was fair even as a kid. And I just, and here I am still, what's fair and what's not fair. And, but it wasn't until 2012 when I was introduced to, at that time it was Pico, Florida. They came to do a one-on-one with me. That really wasn't that successful. And so they didn't give up on me. They figured, well, let's try her again. And this time they brought Desmond with them. Desmond came in. I was a fellow because we were working on this campaign around New on 3 that would affect Floridians. And they knew I kept asking, what is your goal? What are you trying to do? And they said, reach the faith community. And I was like, well, you're not going to reach them like that. And then they asked me to join. And so I began to really understand the briefing of what organizing, grassroots organizing can look like through faith lenses as a fellow. And then it was that one day that I had to shadow Desmond. 12 one-on-ones in one day. I'm shadowing Desmond. No lunch, no dinner, no break.
That sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
Yep.
And
you know, that's what I do now.
And you know, he had a vision then that I didn't even understand, because they wasn't using the term returning citizens. And Desmond brought that to my attention, returning citizens. And God blessed them with a dream. and I caught hold to the dream. And he's like a disease that don't go away.
Oh, Jesus.
I know you mean that in the
now.
best way possible.
Yeah.
That's
It's no cure. The cure is you get on board. And so I was drawn to it because I didn't understand, even myself, how am I impacted in this way when it comes to returning citizens.
Right.
And Desmond asked me, do I have any family that's impacted? That changed the game. Yeah. And so that's just the beginning of the great work.
Ooh, Jesus.
Well, let me ask you a follow up on that, because one of the things I'm intrigued with is, and it's also for you and for Martin Luther King's coming on next, is this idea of the faith community being at the center of the conversation, right? Like we all hear like, hey, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, right? And yet this is the intersection of faith and democracy that we're talking about. How do you kind of manage that? Like, how did that grow together in you as opposed to not necessarily, growing together?
Well, first of all, I understood, when we go back, the faith community, particularly the black community, black churches was the heart and the pillow of the community. And everyone relied on the church and what part and what role we played. In that conversation, I go back to Desmond once again, sowing all these seeds inside of me. And he said something that never went away. He said, he reminded me of the power of the black church. And we were so powerful that we became a threat. And we were often threatened to the point where we were set on fire, houses burned. And he said the magic question, when have we last been a threat? And that's when I knew I wanted to be a threat. I wanted my church to be a threat. Put us on the line of being the one that will be targeted because of what we can do as faith leaders. Then he said, secondly, is that returning citizens, the church made returning citizens feel the worst.
Oh, yeah.
That's when I knew I needed to talk to clergy.
Right.
We need to change this narrative. We need to change this game. Let's be real about, our own past as well as what we've been subjected to.
Got to heal that breach, right?
We needed to.
And if you're going to have all these people coming back into the community, right, where are they going to go?
Exactly.
Hopefully into some pews, right, and churches all over the state.
Yeah. And then we got multiracial, multi-faith. Our Jewish community just believe in second chances. They believe in forgiveness. Then my Muslim community, I can remember Imam Samra says, they're based on brotherly love. If I ever wanted to compete with him, compete by loving his neighbor.
Wow.
And so when you bring, and then you got the Christian who, our faith alone is what we stand on. When you bring all of that together and lock arms, we can change mountains.
That's a powerful force.
Yeah, so
that's a powerful force.
We can move mountains.
One of the things I used to talk about back then, when I was running around with Pastor Rhonda, is how, Dr. Martin Luther King, even at his height, he really didn't have full support of a lot of churches, right? But it was a faithful handful that had his back and what they were able to accomplish, right? And just to think, if I'm not mistaken, right, at one point I heard that the number of churches that was supporting Dr. Martin Luther King, right, during the civil rights era was, I believe, less than 200, right? And you organized over 800 congregations of faith for the state of Florida alone, right? And so, I'm just thinking about the parallels there, thinking about, now that you mentioned that, your first experience was in 1968 when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. I think, man, this is we ought to just go ahead and bring your son on. Neil, why don't you go ahead and bring him on?
Oh man, it was with great honor that we bring on Martin Luther King III onto the Our Voice podcast for what we know is going to be a really fascinating conversation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I don't know if you can see me. I can't tell. Am I visible?
Well, I can't. Can you see him? No. I can't see you, but I could hear you.
We can
so
hear you
well.
Perfectly.
Oh wow! I don't know what is keeping me from being seen. I see you.
All right, that is
Okay,
good.
I see something that says accept request. We touch that. Let's see.
Maybe that's what it is because
You can
Yeah.
invite him to video. I just want to tell you, you can invite him to video if you click on his.
Oh, click on his face. His
Oh.
face went away.
There we go.
Here we go. Here we go.
Okay.
Oh, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see you. Hi there.
Hello, hello. How are you all?
We are wonderful. How about yourself?
Doing well. I certainly enjoyed the beginning of the conversation. I didn't hear everything, but for the last 5 to 7 minutes with Pastor Rhonda and the two of you, and I am so honored to join you. Just as we've seen each other from time to time, and just the tremendous work that you and have done around our nation is so moving to my family personally, but certainly to the individuals who are impacted by the work that you're doing. That really is transforming this nation. It's a sad commentary to live in a nation where there are still people who do their time and yet still are not able to vote. And somewhere I read that that's called taxation without representation. But
Somewhere I read, yes.
but yet it still exists, unfortunately, in some of our communities around our nation. And so the work that you each are doing is so significant and powerful to really transform this nation. Because Dad used to say, a voteless people is a powerless people. And one of the most important steps that we can take is that short step to the ballot box. But it's sad that our nation is actually engaged in some communities in making it harder for people to vote in 2022 than it was in 2020, ironically. Many of these 19 states that have passed these laws making it difficult to vote only started after January 6th, as you perhaps know, of 2021, after that insurrection. And after the fact that, as I said, in 2020, more people, as we all know, voted than ever have voted before. So what did the politicians do on the Republican side? Oh, well, since so many people voted, we need to make sure everybody has an idea, and we need to get this fraud. It's got to be fraud. It can't be that people just wanted to vote. And so we're going to make it harder to vote. I mean, that's a tragic commentary.
Well, one of the things, and I'm struggling because I want to say the Reverend Doctor, just all these different titles come up, But Brother Martin, one of the things that I like to express is how our show is a little unconventional, right? Right. We just dive into the conversation just like how you just dove in, right? But I wanna make sure that we give our listeners really a good context on who that they're listening to right now, right? And I just wanted this to take time there.
Yeah.
Could you just run through this because folks need to know who you are, right? And so they can have an even deeper understanding, right? That we folks we know your dad, but we want to know you right now, right? And so Neil, why don't you go ahead and just run through some of these impressive things, man.
Like Desmond, I want to use all the titles, but if it's okay, Martin, I'm gonna be Flavor Flav to your Chuck D, man, and hype you up here for a second if I could. Right. Might be showing my age
Flavor
there. But, Martin Luther King III is a civil rights activist and a global humanitarian, right? The oldest son of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Miss Coretta Scott King. Martin is a graduate of Morehouse College. In 1986, he served as an at-large representative on the Board of Commissioners in Fulton County, Georgia. In 1998, he was elected as the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization, as we all know, co-founded by his father. He negotiated with leaders and legislators in Georgia to change the previously divisive state flag to the current one, which represents wisdom, justice, and moderation. Along with his wife, Mr. King currently leads the Drum Major Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to education, action, engagement with world leaders, and collaboration with socially conscious organizations. Lastly, he is the recipient of numerous awards and several honorary degrees, including one of India's most prestigious honors for outstanding contributions to the promotion of human rights. Global humanitarian.
Y'all heard that?
Woo!
So now you know who you're listening to. And Martin, definitely the first thing I really want to start off with is, just like we asked Pastor Rhonda about what really got her engaged in the work that she does, right? What made you make that conscious decision to follow in the legacy of your father?
Well, I would like to say I had a choice, but I'm not sure that would be accurate. What I will say is the fertile ground that existed within our home sort of precipitated and created a background. I mean, seeing a dad and a mom. I mean, after dad was killed in '68, then of course mother rose to the occasion. Although she had always been involved, most people, maybe didn't see it necessarily because, dad was bigger than life. Not that was his intent, but that's the way he was projected.
And we didn't have Twitter or TikTok back then
right.
either, and Instagram. So
no.
Yeah, so that's understandable.
But I think that being nurtured in an environment, number one, I think at a certain point, I've always felt, and it was reared around the concept that to him or her, that much is given, of him or her is much required. So from that vantage point, and traveling with mom for many years after, I traveled with dad, I guess about 6 or 7 times. My brother and I traveled most of those times. 1 or 2 times I was with him solo. And so seeing him in the context of his work. And then in 1968, after he was killed, I think it really, certainly subconsciously, I probably had an understanding, but not consciously, until all of these people came to our home and were lifting us up in prayer and literally lifting us up with their words, from those in the entertainment community to those in the political community. Just about everybody who was running for president at that time came to Dad's homegoing service, including Richard Nixon, who, by the way, many people don't know, they conferred in 1958 or in the 50s. Of course, he met with President Eisenhower, but Nixon was vice president, and Dad was invited to the Ghanaian first Ghanaian celebration, and Nixon, in I believe '58, led a delegation from the United States to represent the U.S. at Ghana's independence, and Dad was invited too. So they conferred. They conferred on a number of issues. There are letters that they wrote to each other. Although Dad met with the president, he conferred a lot with the vice president, who was Nixon. So Nixon didn't come just because he was running for president. Because you also had, of course, Robert Kennedy and members of the Kennedy family and every other political candidate who was running. You had the Rockefeller family represented. And I think, beyond that, more importantly, you had masses of people, over 200,000 who came into Atlanta. And then you had the hundreds of thousands of people in Atlanta, who loved and respected. And I heard you say earlier, and you were talking about the church support. The reality is, at the time of Dad's death, most people, I won't say most, but many people, there had been a job, the media, the mainstream media, had done a job on discrediting him because he came out in 1967 on April 4th, 1 year from the date of his assassination. He came out against the war in Vietnam. So the mainstream media, the whole apparatus that, I don't like the way it's characterized, but the fake news, all that, everybody, he was the darling up to 65, 66, and then things began to change. So less than 30% of the people supported what he was doing at the time of his death. Now, the irony of all that, which was a whole lot of backdrop, people were so frustrated and angry that over 100 cities went up in flames at the time of his death. Although people, if you did polling, you would see that he was not as well liked as he ultimately became over time. And today, unfortunately, people are trying to interpret his message, and it's wrong.
Well, Martin, let me ask you a quick question because you touched on it, and I think Pastor Ron, I really want you to weigh in on this too as well. We touch again on the support of the church in social justice movement, right? And Pastor Ron, you talk about the importance of it. We talked about how I guess realistically, when you move everything away, basically, your dad did not have like full support of the faith community. I'm interested to know, what role do you think the faith community should be playing today, right? And how involved should it be in, as it relates to even the access to democracy, so fighting against voter suppression, or actually in our case, advocating on behalf of people who have been impacted by the criminal justice system.
So clearly, in my judgment, the faith community should be leading these charges. And the faith community is not monolithic like everything else. It's like Black folk not monolithic, or any group of people are. We are, we're all kinds of things. I'm saying that though to say, it would really depend on who you're defining as the faith community, because what is greatly disappointing to me is, Billy Graham and all of his followers and his son, Franklin Graham, that's a faith community. But
okay, so we don't want to leave them out too. We don't want to leave them out, right?
Is adamantly against what I think the progressive faith community represents. And it almost seems to me, this faith community, and I don't like to do this, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's what I believe. The faith community that we're talking about, which is the conservative, the right wing, the folks who claim they have all these numbers, how you can get behind somebody like a Donald Trump who don't even go to church, who holds the Bible in an inappropriate way, and yet this is your leader. So it says that there's a problem because this person has not demonstrated that he knows how to treat human beings. So, right, so Pastor, but getting back to the even, let's go narrowly, very, very quick. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, because I want to pass around. I want to know, what is your definition of the faith community?
When I say the faith community, it's not just so much a building or a particular leader, but I do look at, if we're going to be the faith community, we have to look out for all people, which will include those who have been disenfranchised, discriminated against, oppressed, suppressed. I do feel that it's a huge disconnect with the faith community and the community, because everyone does not feel that spirit of belonging. And I think we need to be extremely more intentional by uplifting, including those who are impacted, our young people. There's a disconnect, and we need to fix that.
Yeah. So
in a number of ways.
I don't know if you want to, because I think Martin touched on, when you talk about, say, the conservative faith community, and so whether there's a distinction between, say, a progressive faith community, conservative faith community, or should they be like just this faith community in general, right? And then the other piece, and Neil, I really need your help on this one, because when you're talking about, the politicizing of faith, right? Where now it's less about humanity and more about politics, or less about our faith and or our religious beliefs, and more about the politics. how do we cut through all of that?
Yeah, I mean, my heart hurts when I think about that whole how deep the divide has become. And Martin, I'm really intrigued with what your thoughts are, because when you were initially talking, one thing that really hit my head was thinking about MLK Day, right? And as I scroll through my phone, right, suddenly I see, like, on the positive side, how the message of love and the message of dignity, could cross so many lines, to the point where there are people quoting, your father, and in every way. And then the side that makes me really sad is some of those same folks, who are friends and family of mine. I'm like, I don't know that they would have supported what he was doing, in 1967, 1968. And there's that disconnect. And so if we fast forward to the point now where it's like there's this division, why should the faith community be divided?
And so let me just make sure I make this point very clear. And then some folks might think it's controversial. Like what Neil just said, right? When he's talking about his folks, that he's not sure that a lot of them would not have supported him, right? It's so easy to get caught up into that, but here's the reality. It was a whole bunch of black churches that talk MLK quotes today that would not have supported him back in those days too as well. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that I always try to guard against is we can't get so one-sided that we lose sight, right, of the of what you say when you got to take the beam out of your eye before you could take the prick out of somebody else's eye. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's important too. And it goes back to, how do we strip all of that stuff away and talk about faith and the role it should play in advocating for people like me and Neil to have a better life, to be able to reintegrate back into our community? What is that role that I should be able to go to any church, right? Whether it's Baptist, whether it's Methodist, whether it's progressive, whether they're white, Spanish, or black, I should be able to go to any institution of faith and be able to get help and have that institution of faith advocate for a better life for me.
If it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, absolutely. The problem is, and I think in terms of the public space, and this is broadly speaking, civility has been lost. And until we re-engage and reintroduce and present civility into the political landscape, something has been unleashed in America that, we can define it as a lot of things. For example, the nation appeared to come together after the tragic death of George Floyd. And why was that? Because people were at home sheltering, not just in the United States, by the way, but all over the world. And so they saw a policeman become judge, jury, and executioner, and they felt that was wrong. So in the United States, in every state, you had a demonstration. Now, these demonstrations were not just Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was certainly significant because they are the catalyst for a lot of it. Mm-hmm. But there were young white people leading demonstrations. Every state in the nation. We hadn't seen that in a long time. Now, I'm saying that to say that I'm going to say something else in a minute. But secondly, we saw this in Europe. We saw it in Australia. We saw it in New Zealand. We saw it on the African continent. We saw it in South America and in Canada. The whole world was coming together saying this is wrong, demonstrating. Now, because a lot of these demonstrations were led by young whites, then every time we've seen progress, after the March on Washington, where blacks and whites and labor and religious leaders all came together, just less than 2 weeks, basically, was the 16th Street bombing of the church in Birmingham. So every time we have gains, we have setbacks. So we're seeing that pushback now from when we saw this mobilization. Now, by the way, that just means that we are going through a cleansing process. And we really still need to engage in what Dad called was a revolution of values that we all can embrace as a society. And then, we will address the triple evils of poverty, racism, and violence. in our nation and our world. Because Dad said, if we don't learn nonviolence, we might have to face non-existence. And we are, if we look at what's happening, whether it's in the Ukraine today and what Russia is doing tragically to the Ukrainians, unacceptable. And yet we don't know how to stop what Putin is doing. I mean, war is so destructive and tragic and sad. And, then the irony of all of that, and while this tragedy is going on, your racism pops up its head there, because you saw where African students, and maybe there still may be a few left there, who were trying to get out. They put them off the trains and the buses, and the countries surrounding Ukraine wouldn't allow them in initially. Now, I think it's been worked out now, but it's just sad that even in the midst of when war is going on and people are mistreating you, then you gonna mistreat somebody else. That's crazy.
Well, it's interesting to me what I hear when you're saying that is an inability sometimes to focus on humans, right? On fellow people. Right. Because it's like you talked about civility, you talked about like revolution of values. And I think that revolves around like people and being in proximity to actual people's lives. And that when we have made progress, like George Floyd, we saw a human being, we could connect with his humanity. And one of the things that I find very challenging for a cause that I dedicate my life to, which is democracy and making sure that people's voices are heard, is that sometimes we lose the ability to talk about the human presence in that equation. And somehow it turns into, I'm an Ohio State fan, and look, Des, I got it brought out on another call. It seems like Ohio State versus Michigan fighting versus, hey, I love football, or, because these values are so important to us. And deep down, I think most people can connect with them, but sometimes it seems like it's hard to pull them out. Like it's there, but instead of the love, we're getting the divisiveness, we're getting the hate, we're getting the fear. And I just think we're at a tough spot, especially as it relates to all the issues around democracy.
But that's why we've got to reintroduce civility. Dad used to say, or he really articulated and emulated, that we could disagree without being disagreeable. And that's what has to be brought back.
I'm glad you said that, right? Because one of our producers, Brandon, he insisted that this one particular question be asked to you, right? And and this is a perfect segue, right? When you talk about that, your dad was a master at the art of coalition building across cultural and political divides, right? And so the question to pose to you then is that what are you doing now to engage with policymakers who may have diverse perspectives about voting rights? What are you doing to engage them?
So when recently in January, we had a major campaign for about 2 months between December and January. And our objective was, we can't really observe or celebrate a King holiday without legislation, the John Lewis Bill and the Freedom to Vote Act. And yet neither of those passed because of politics. But we had spoken to Democrats and Republicans. The Republicans told us they couldn't support it. Although, they supported the Voting Rights Act. Some of them, back when it was last voted on, I want to say 207 or 206, somewhere around. These same Republicans now, when it comes to a new piece of legislation, they're kind of silent, which means that we can't stop dialoguing. We're going to continue the dialogue. But we can't blame Republicans for this in this context, because there were 2 Democrats. Out of the 50 Democrats, 2 of them decided that they couldn't support it.
Are there any Republicans out there? I mean,
well, I'm intrigued with the folks who voted for the Voting Rights Act. Are there folks that were ready to move, or what were those conversations like? That's really intriguing to hear.
Well, yeah. Again, you had 48 Democrats, and you needed 50 plus the vice president to break the tie, and yet you couldn't get 50 Democrats. Now, the Democrats all said we support these bills, but the 2 who did not, they were not willing to deal with a provision called a filibuster, which Dad said is one of the most dangerous things in Congress, because it was used for years to stop anti-lynching legislation from being passed. It's been used to stop civil rights legislation. It's been used 3 or 4 times to stop voting rights legislation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a relic and needs to go. These 2 senators who didn't vote, Senator Manchin, Democrat, and Senator Sinema, wanted to keep the filibuster. But yet they didn't have a problem going around the filibuster just a few months back when you had to address the debt ceiling. So it's to me, it's political hypocrisy. But this is what people do, and they're not held accountable, and they get away with it. Don't tell me you support something, but you can't find a pathway to get it done.
You know, it's and Pastor Ron, please feel free to weigh in on this too. But you know, when I look at this from 10,000 feet up, right? You know, I see, man, okay, wow, you couldn't get 50 Democrats to agree on something, right? But you know, the flip side that I see is, wow, we couldn't even get one Republican
That's
to
important.
say that this was right? And so my thing is I do believe that if we continue down this road, right, of only relying on one side to get things right, then we're going to have a lot of these disappointments of not having John Lewis Right Act Pact, that we've got to figure out some type of way, like your dad did. Your dad did at a time, right, when people were getting murdered, people were getting hung on trees to stop them from registering to vote or even voting. There was dangerous, perilous times, and somehow or another, right? Some way or another, your dad found a way to get some from each side to say, hey, something has got to change, right? And I think we've got to find that thing that we need to do to make that happen, right? That we have to create that condition. Otherwise, it's just gonna just keep going, steamrolling.
And Martin, I'm and Pastor Ron, I'm curious what you think of this, and Des, because I'm hearing you, right? And I think of Amendment 4, right, where it was almost a blessing that we didn't have to work with politicians, right? Like we didn't. There were no politicians on stages with us. This was a move of the people, and it was directly to the voter. And you could go into Republican houses and talk to folks, and it was just like talking to anybody else. But man, you get that politics in there.
Pastor Rhonda can talk about that, because I guarantee you, Pastor Rhonda, please tell me if I'm wrong, but there were some faith leaders that were supporting Amendment 4 that was Republican.
That's right.
Right? That voted for probably the governor that we have now.
That's right.
So how was we able to get even the faith community to look beyond their politics and do what was right, right, in the sight of God, what was right for humanity? And I think that is when we figure out how to do that more often, I think we get a lot of stuff. But talk about that.
When I think about with Amendment 4, even getting the petition signed, it went beyond what's morally right. And we stuck to that. And I could remember even some churches questioning, should this actually happen? And I had to really go and say, well, if we want to look at it biblically, Joseph would have been a returning citizen if he lived in Florida. And he didn't really rape Miss Potiphar, nor did Tupac rape. I had to make it plain. Paul wrote all of the Episcopals in prison. In Florida, he would have been a returning citizen. In fact, your father, if he had lived in Florida, with the many times he had been arrested for what was right, Florida would have saw him as a returning citizen. So how did we take that and make it plain where people understood it and see what was morally right?
Wow.
And how do we act upon it?
Wow.
Let me add one dynamic that I think I heard someone say not long ago. I've been trying to say it for years, but I said it in a different way, but this is even better. We have to get people to listen and hear. You listen with your ears, you hear with your heart. So when people hear you, then they'll move to do that which is right. Unfortunately, you can't hear people when you're screaming at one another. Not unfortunately, but it's just the reality. if I'm hollering at you, you can't hear me. I mean, you may make some points, but you're not going to really hear it. So the fact of the matter is, I think that's really how we have to frame, discussions. And if you can get people to listen and hear, then you can create change. The kind of change that I think can be long-term and sustainable change.
What I'm hearing when you say that is we got to be careful about taking the bait, right? Right. Those of us who believe in change, those of us who believe in fundamental human dignity, that maybe there's others who the divisiveness works and it might not work for us. Right. I mean,
well,
and I appreciate you saying that.
No, I think that it always, we have to give some people, you're just not going to be able to reach because they that's just the law of averages. But I think most people can be reached, and most people, or the majority, and that's really all you really want to do, because we're not going to ever get everybody to agree on everything. But all of us want, it seems to me, our children to have the best education. All of us, most people want healthcare, the best healthcare, which we should have in this country, which we really don't. All of us want to be able to acquire and have a decent job with decent pay and deserve it. All of us want to have justice. Now, that's the big one, because that doesn't exist in this system. I don't know why we call it a criminal justice system. It is a criminal system, but it's not just.
We talk about that all the time.
I mean, it's oxymoron.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a different name, but I haven't figured out one yet, man. We ought to do a contest, right? Rename the criminal justice system into something that's more indicative of what it is.
Yeah. But my higher point was, Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I wanted to add to something you said, because I just did a couple of listening sessions with a group of young Black men who did not know one another, come from different walks of life.
Oh, okay. Did we lose him?
Oh, wait a minute. What is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just made a comment. I'm sorry. I made a comment about the criminal justice system.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Martin.
Okay. Do you have the? I don't know what I pushed, but I was trying to get back. But maybe it's something from your side.
Oh, there we go. I think we got it.
Okay. This should be it. Yeah. There we go. Back.
There we go.
Okay.
But I was just saying real quickly, what these young men had in common were they were very angry. They were angry with a lot of things. How the system is failing them. There's no Black agenda. It was just a number of things. And in that group, when I say it was a couple of guys were returning citizens, some were in college. It was just really a powerful group that I could hold this listening session with. But they said, I asked them, we realized with them not knowing one another, they had one thing in common, that they were angry. And I asked the question, what are you going to do with this anger? And I used for an example for them to something, meeting people where they are, what they can relate to. I used the movie Straight Outta Compton. And I used these rappers that was extremely angry because they kept being targeted by the police. What they did with the anger was they put it in the lyrics.
Yeah.
Many of us got angry at the lyrics because we missed the message. And so it goes back to, what type of messaging are we going to use that will attract people where they will listen and then act upon that in a way that will bring change? And I think that's a part that's missing, especially with our young people. When we're saying reaching and including and making sure that they're a part, it has to be a message that they could relate to, that will draw them, that they then will begin to act upon and move upon as well. Just wanted to throw that in based on something you said and as you were going through your conversation piece.
No, absolutely. That is so. I mean, it feels like that number one, it is elements of the entertainment community, the hip hop and rap community that reaches vast numbers of young people. And that, as you said, I've experienced the same thing we all have, talking to young people, and that anger, how you channel that anger into something constructive is the challenge. And when we're able to do that, then we can maybe have some transformative results in our nation. And you know, I believe that it can happen. But the challenge to right now is we are going in so many directions. There are so many distractions. We need a strategic plan, basically.
I gotta, man, that is so right. I'm sitting there listening to us, like in our own lives or with a group of people who we love. We'll take this pain and turn it into purpose, and that's the story of our country right now.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
This moment of pain. It's like, how does that get channeled into real purpose that impacts people's lives?
Yeah.
Wow. So, man, listen, I'm so grateful for you, Martin. You definitely, Pastor Rhonda, and the folks at Fireside. You know, definitely, man, have to give a shout out to Fireside, right, for creating this platform that allows us to really elevate our voices.
Hey, Des, are you getting ready to close us out? Can I ask Martin one random question?
Wait, yes, you can.
Man, Martin, so I was
get ready, Martin. I'm telling you, this is coming out of left field. Brace yourself.
Totally. I was so excited to be talking to you tonight. I threw it up on my social media platform, and a friend of mine said he met you, and he actually has a piece of art from your daughter.
Really? Okay.
Is that possible? I was going to say, is your daughter an artist or something?
No, so that's weird.
That is hilarious. I'll have to get our teams to show. He shared a picture, and he's like, "I got it." She was a young child, and he was like, "Man, I've cherished it because he got it somehow at some event."
She's not an artist, but she has potential, maybe.
I love it.
You know, yeah.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
It was random. Des was right. It was random.
Okay, listen. We're thinking that we was wrapping up, but what I'm hearing from my producers is that there are some questions that's out there in the audience, and so how do we call them up?
All right, bring them up. This is fun.
Bring them up, Brandon. So our production team they've been getting back at us because we've been talking junk about them and saying, "Oh, y'all job ain't that difficult." And they were like, "Okay, you think it ain't difficult? We gonna let you take control of some of this." And man, let me tell you, it has really created a deeper appreciation for our production team of Zay and Brandon.
That's right. They're like, we ain't ended on Neil's silly art question. We're gonna get a real question from somebody in the audience. I understand. I hear you guys. Okay, so, all right, welcome. What's his name, Zay? What is it?
Hi, my name's Isidro.
Oh, hi, Isidro. Nice to meet you.
What's up, man? How you doing, Isidro?
I'm doing well. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and this is such an honor to be in the presence of you guys. And just we are in some difficult times. I'm. It wasn't more of a question, although I have tons of them, but. When you guys were talking about the criminal justice system, and to rename it, I was in college in the early 90s in California where we were passing, people think that California is all liberal, but man, for a long time, California has led some of the worst legislation when it comes to minorities. I mean, just think of the Chinese Exclusion Act, But I was a criminal justice major, and one of my professors said at the time that the criminal justice system was, and this was pretty stark. I was like Neo in the Matrix, refusing to believe the reality that the criminal justice system was created to control a certain segment of society. And it hurt my feelings back then, but the older I got, the more I got to see it. And growing up in California, we weren't left behind when it came to police brutality. And so I started to think, what would be a better name for it without changing it? And I came up with it's criminal just us. It's just for us. It's just for certain people to benefit. And so maybe that's the way it should be named, just us, because it's not created equal. A lot of us don't get the same type of treatment. Just look at the January 6th riot as opposed to protest and Black Lives Matter 6 months before. So I just wanted to come up here and mention how proud I am for you guys to put on a show like this on Fireside, because we could all learn a little bit more and bring us together. And I'm just appreciative of you guys' conversation. That's really what I wanted to mention.
Well, thank you so much, man. Appreciate that. And listen,
and can I just
you I know we didn't have an opportunity to even announce a prize for whoever
comes up with the best name. Yeah,
we already got a submission. That's cool.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, man, thank you for that question. That one of the through lines I think that we see around the democracy work is this idea of it is just us in some ways, where we have elected officials for so long picking voters, right? So you see it's like, hey, we're going to not allow people with felony convictions to vote. We're not going to allow other people's voices to be heard. And we all need to unite, to break down that just us model. So thank you so much for that question. Oh, we got another one. Oh, man, these guys are working hard, Des.
Look like we got Sarah?
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much for having me up again. This conversation has been absolutely incredible. I do have a question, kind of on the point that you just made, and also around this really siloing of information in our media and in our communities that I feel like so often people who are already potentially like-minded or engaged or interested or informed would join a conversation like this, but perhaps the people who need to hear it, how do you break through? Obviously, Mr. King, your father was a legend of communicating across the aisles. And I'm just curious, how do you break through to the people who aren't, self-selecting to join these conversations, to get them to hear these perspectives and these conversations? I'd love to hear from Desmond, from you and your team as well, as these master communicators of this podcast. How do you break through to people who aren't joining the conversations themselves?
We'll start by broadcasting on Fireside Chat, right? To try to expand the platforms that can reach a greater number of people, right? So, we can get on platforms that just only cater to a certain type of individual. Then that will, of course, limit people who we can actually touch. But if we can get on as many platforms as possible that touches a greater variety of folks, that allows us to at least the opportunity to get into their living rooms, to get into their cars and their smartphones, and start having that conversation.
Yeah, and I know, Martin, you're going to have the best answer here. Mine real quick is that we believe in this kind of longer term conversation, like trust people to have the more deep conversations and actually, get past the kind of the sound bites and just the surface and really start to dig into those places where we might have some disagreements, but it actually brings us to a deeper truth and understanding of some of these issues. With that being said, I'd love to know what you think, Martin.
Well, unfortunately, our society is so entertainment driven that we have to utilize, even comedians, because they can say things oftentimes that people hear. Not and off. Take a Trevor Noah or a Dave Chappelle, or there's so many, or Chris Rock, and then there are others. They become communicators. I'm not suggesting that that's where you take your message. I'm just saying that they have huge numbers of people who are very diverse, who listen to them. And maybe you can begin to get a message there just as through music. I think over the years, Stevie Wonder has talked to people. One of the conscious, everything can't be conscious. I wish it could, but I wish that's where we lived. Unfortunately, many people live in shallowness. So you have to use the forums where people live and communicate through every one of these genres, whether, in terms of social media. I think social media is just beginning to scratch the surface of what it potentially can do. And there's so much more in a significant way that it can do. Unfortunately, it's doing a lot of damage, whether it's to young girls, whether it's to, people, some in the LGBTQ community, because suicides are going up, all kind of things. And this is because they're highlighted people's lives on social media at an elevated level. And so we got to figure out how to address. I mean, we got a myriad of things we got to address.
So one of the things, talk about, meeting people where they're at. I'm thinking about, in the Bible, they're talking about go out into the highways and byways. And I started laughing because I remember when we was collecting petitions, right? I know Pastor Ronnie, are you risky enough to tell that story?
Oh,
where we were willing to go wherever it needed to go to collect petitions, right?
And we did just that.
And that's how the question that was posed, right? Sarah was like, how do you reach people that don't normally tap in to the platform? And so, like a church person, how do you reach somebody who don't come to church? What you got to do?
Well, we got to go where they are.
And where do we go to get petitions?
We go to the strip clubs, the nightclubs, and any other type of club.
Yep.
Where the people at?
Where the people are. We were at parks.
Biker bars. All that.
Listen, you name it.
We have to, when we realize that the message is important enough and it's genuine enough, then we have to be courageous enough to go places that we may not be accustomed to going or comfortable going, but we have to go and have those tough conversations.
Because someone's going to pay attention.
Someone's going to
pay attention.
Yeah, I think deep down, like people go to church, right? Sometimes to get a daily reminder of what's important and what has meaning, right? That doesn't mean that people who aren't there don't have those same desires. And so, like you said, we got to go talk to them.
They just asked me in 2020. They asked me the question because I had hired these millennials, and they asked, Pastor Rhonda, could we hang your faith in Florida banner in the nightclub? And I was like, no, I was so afraid I was going to offend the faith community. But that community that was in the club was ready to do something. I would never make that mistake again. So will the banner go in the nightclub? Oh yeah, it's going in the strip club and any other club.
That's what's up.
So is that how we're ending this show? With the pastor talking about the nightclubs and the strip club?
That's right, in the club. I wish we had some 50 Cent to play. You can find us in the club, collecting petitions and all.
Meet me in the club. That's where it's going down.
It's going down.
Well, man, listen, big thanks.
Martin, thank you so much for joining us, man. We once again thank the folks at Fireside for creating this platform to allow us to have this conversation. Really appreciate the work that you've been doing and how you've been carrying on the torch with your father's legacy and fighting for justice and fighting for a more inclusive democracy and for people like me and Neil. So thank you so much, Martin, and you too, Pastor Ron.
Yeah, really it's been an incredible honor to spend the hour with you. I'm really grateful for what you all do.
Thank you all for bringing this to the community, and thank you, Pastor Rhonda. I mean, thank you. This is every little bit that is done, perhaps can begin to change lives because there's, Desmond, what you've been doing, where those who know it's phenomenal. But everybody needs to know, because the more people that know, the more people are going to join the cause.
That's why I wrote that book, Let My People Vote. Yeah. Right. And I think I sent you a copy a while back. Yes, I hope you read it by now.
Yeah.
And to encourage other folks to make sure that they go online and get a copy of Let My People Vote. So they'll hear that story. They'll know more about why I'm so passionate about this work. So yeah, that was a good one. I appreciate that setup.
That was fantastic. We're 13 for 13. You mentioned in your book, me mentioned Ohio State. This is good.
We got it going on.
I think I got to get my life in order here. Right, we're talking about important stuff.
It's time for me to holler at my homeboy Wavy Mob, and bring on our theme song.
See y'all.
All right.
Yes. All right, y'all. Yes.
Question.